banter for the people. We got Jeepo in the house. The Titanic Truths. The name changes in full effect. You have a book that you've been working through.
Yep, I think we're coming up on about 5 years, and it's been pure joy. I never thought it would take this long in medicine. I thought I'd give this 2 years, and I'm on 5 years, and it's coming. It's almost there.
Now, I think the most intriguing part of your book is it's this place in history that everybody knows of the sinking of the Titanic.
It's iconic.
Everyone's heard about it.
You don't even have to say any more. They know it sinks, and it was
you
terrible.
can envision it. You can see the boat. Yeah. People are going off. It sinks. You can see the disaster of it. But people kind of, other than the fact that there's loss of life, people don't really envision the sinking of the Titanic surrounded in not just the mystery of the boat, but the people that are on the boat and why potentially those people would want to be taken out.
Yes.
And we always look at different events. We look at events like 9/11. We look at events...
Kennedy assassination.
Today, we go, whoa. What's really happening here? And
was there more to the story? What is the backstory? And it's always, why did that occur?
And the Titanic's always been looked at with a pretty glossy brush of... It was just a boat that was a big boat. That was the nicest boat. I kind of sounded like Trump there for a second. And that it was just going on this extravagant excursion. Now, with extravagant excursions, what do we know that happens when it's the pinnacle of something?
Everybody wants to be part of it.
The dopest people in the world are on the boat. It's the most prized ticket. It's difficult. It's a lot of, can I get on? Can I not? How does this happen?
It's like the Super Bowl. You want to be there. If you have means, you will be on that, guaranteed.
Right.
If you're not there, if you're working, your kids, your wife, your friends will be on it, guaranteed.
And I think the uniqueness of this, for you to tell this story, that we actually have a relative involved that knew more about what was actually going on that boat, has been something that I grew up hearing this story.
As did I. I heard the stories, and you had to hear the stories from me.
And what was always intriguing about it is the Titanic is this classic story that you walk into a grocery store line. I swear it's every 3 months. It's a National Geographic, not necessarily U.S. Weekly, a Time magazine. There's a Titanic something at minimum every 6 months.
Yes.
In your little grocery store line. And it's always just the big boat went down.
Yeah.
And it's nothing about the stories that you've told me and
the stories that I've been told and now share.
The political situations around the boat.
Yes.
The extravagant figures that were pushing the limits on what was society becoming. How could it change? The corruption involved. And we stop and we forget sometimes that, like, if the Titanic went today, it would be the Elon Musks. It would be the Joe Rogans.
Yes.
It would be the Epsteins. You know, it's all of these characters.
Power players.
It's the Super Bowl boat. So when you think about the Super Bowl and you watch it through the lens of Instagram today, you go, everybody is there. And if they're not there, why are they not there?
And if they're not there, why are they not there? And what if something would have bad happened at a Super Bowl, and then they looked at the list of who wasn't there or backed out at the last minute? They would ask, why weren't they there? And that is exactly what happened as stories told to me through W.T. Stead. Don't take my word for it. Google it. Google W.T. Stead.
But you got to get a little into it.
Well,
you say, I'll take your word for it, but let's not take your word for it, but let's hear what you heard.
Okay. Well, what he got on the ship with his best friend, John J. Astor. They were going from...
And who was John J. Astor at that time period?
Richest man in the world. Richest man in the world. He was like a railroad magnate. Everybody knew John
Jeff
J.
Bezos.
Jeff Bezos. Just had lost his wife. I think I apologize. I need to check on this, whether she died or divorced. I think he lost her. So he was on deck now with a young wife, a new young wife, which caused a stir. And then we found out during the stir, she was pregnant. She had just gotten married, and now she's pregnant. So now this was a stew. And we found that out at the head tables because Stead was a raconteur. He could tell stories. Captain Smith knew Stead. People knew Stead. Stead had been well known and written about internationally and nationally. He had written on the Boer War. He was a personal confidant of the niece of the Tsar of Russia. He'd already been in America a couple times. Well-traveled, well-versed, well-known, just a good guy.
But his rise to prominence was being the youngest editor at the time in England.
Yep.
Right.
Big shot. This would be, I don't even know who you'd compare that to, but he popped on.
We don't really look at things like that, but
almost like a Ted Turner in the sense that he brought something that was new, and he was brash and young, and he was well-liked and probably more hated.
But the Pall Mall Gazette,
opinion on him.
But the Pall Mall Gazette was kind of the smut papers, right?
Pall Mall Gazette was willing to say what needed to be said, and it was doing something in, some would call it yellow journalism. He actually met with Randolph Hearst in America, and all of a sudden they would go little short headliners, and they would do salacious titles to get you to read them. And a lot of people thought that was very,
because he was the first person to track a serial murderer, you didn't do that back then.
He was really involved in Jack the Ripper. He was really involved in following and investigating this thought about childhood sex trafficking. They thought it was just that was fake news, and as he started to dive deep into it, he found out it wasn't fake news, it was real news.
And while he's coining terms like Jack the Ripper, it's not because he's like, ooh, this is fun stuff.
No.
He's like, in order to get people to care, we gotta sizzle it up a little bit.
He was a hardcore Christian who really felt that on this work, we do God's work on this world with our own hands, and he was a devout Christian. Yep. And then
I guess bring us to the day that the ship is departing, because I think that really adds context to who WT was, who John J. Astor was, their friend group. Because I think it's very important to realize, like, who is this little crew that he has a lot of correspondence with, to give it a little levity or a little bit of more depth of what type of group this was and what type of knowledge he might have had.
Yeah. Well, WT was well known in the world, and he had been invited by President Taft of America at this point to come and speak at a big peace forum in America. And WT did not let his staff know that. He kept it kind of quiet. He was a humble man. So while the Titanic was built over in Belfast, came into Southampton, everybody who was anybody would be going down to see this big opulent ship. It was at the White Star Line, I think it was berth 44 in Southampton. Think of this. If you're ever in Rochester, Minnesota, and you go down 2nd Street, you'll see the entire north side of St. Mary's Hospital. St. Mary's is 8 stories high, and it's a massive building. Titanic was 10 stories high. St. Mary's is 800 foot long. The Titanic was 882 feet long. St. Mary's is about 90 feet wide, and that's similar, but it's bigger than that massive building you see in Rochester, Minnesota.
I mean, I love the Minnesota reference. We might have to get a better, like, international reference for that one. Because, like, I could envision it because I grew up right next to it. But, like, for the viewer out there, it's a big, big ship. It's larger than you could conceive, even though it's much smaller than the cruise ships we imagine now.
Correct. We will try to get a New York and an LA reference. But
people always really like, oh, it was Empire State Building on its side. But Anyways.
I'll work on that.
Okay.
So anybody, it was anybody, like all of WT's staff was going down there, and they're a little perplexed. Why aren't you going down? You know, this is an opportunity for you to get down, walk around on it, see it's incredible. Not until the day he was going did he announce to his staff, I didn't go down because I'm going on it. I'm going to America. They're going, what? He was just humble that way. He didn't want to make a big deal of it. Well, Stead.
Which is definitely probably the opposite of what most people were doing.
Probably.
I would imagine you're waving around, I'm going on the Titanic for, in an era like this, it's probably months ahead of time that you knew.
Could be. That
right?
Yeah, I would think so.
I mean, I was trying to tell people I was going to the Super Bowl like way before, and I wasn't even going into the Super Bowl. I was just sitting next to it.
You sat next to it. Well, lo and behold, Stead was notoriously, like your mother, always on time. If you're on time, you're late. If you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. And if you're late, you're left. He would get to things
That's
early.
a Marine saying, but also my family takes over it.
It's true. So he got there very, very early in the morning on the day of the 10th of April. And can you imagine the sights, the sounds? The horseless carriage was just coming into being. Most people walk to the boat or train to the boat or come up on horseback on boat. Think of that. This is crazy. You know, you got horses pooping in the street. You got the steam from the boat. You got the loud honks taking place. It was a bustling mess. 100,000 were on the dock watching it go.
Because this would be as crazy today as I would imagine as like a group of people going to the moon and back.
It was a big deal.
Right? It's got to be something around that level.
Yeah, or even the current waste management tournament down in Phoenix. I don't know. It was
Maybe.
wild.
Yeah.
Totally. It was debacle, and I'm sure there's a lot of drinking, and people who couldn't go on the ship were having a heyday.
Yeah, it's probably more like the Super Bowl. You're right.
He did get there early and got up on top of the ship, he met by Captain Smith, who knew him. His room wasn't quite ready. So he had to kind of meander and got to sit to the side up 10 stories and watch people come up. So he got to see a lot of people he knew coming up. He expected to see his friends, the Vanderbilts, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the Morgans, and all these people, John J. Astor, the Strausses, the Guggenheims. Of course, they'll all be coming on. Many of those didn't load there then. And he thought, oh, okay, they didn't get on here. They'll get on in Cherbourg, France. Okay, so even so I think they left at noon and pulled into, went across the English Channel. It took about 6 hours.
Was there any dope musicians in the time period that went on that?
There was
Is
dope
there
musicians.
is there a Taylor Swift in the mix?
Great question. The answer is yes, and I don't know who that is, but I'm going to check that out.
But when he walks up to this plank and he's hanging out, I would imagine most people that get on the Titanic aren't met by the captain.
Probably not. Maybe the first class people were.
Right.
First class people, I think, probably were, and there's a few hundred of them.
But he got to, what I'm trying to escalate is that he has the different type of Super Bowl experience than everyone else.
Yeah.
He's like getting the front row treatment.
He'd be like Dana White going to the Super Bowl.
Right.
He'd be like Rogan going to. He was
in the mix.
He was in the mix, and even beyond the mix, because first night, captain said, "Would you sit at my table?" You know, the captain's table would be maybe 10 or 12 people, and you wanted Stead there. Why? Everybody knew him, very interesting, and he could spin a tale. He was a great orator. Debonair, handsome. He stood out. He was a man's man. Everybody knew him, and you wanted to be around him.
How old is he at this time?
62.
Okay.
He would be 62. So he was.
He's lived out a majority of his career. He's now like a living legend more than like he's not a young buck.
He is a Tom Brady. He is literally a living legend. Several very successful books out. His editorial career is at its epitome. He's traveled the world, Turkey, South Africa, Russia, all around Europe. There's a bust of him at The Hague. I mean, he was the man.
Yeah, and not beholden to anybody anymore.
No.
He'd already lived through
Yep.
and we'll get more into this story.
He's taken the arrows. Didn't challenge him at all. And he was, put it in a personal time, he was a little saddened because his wife and daughter couldn't go with him. The daughter was, Estelle was really into dance, and they were at a dance recital in northwestern England, and they couldn't go. And when he'd go, he's going to be gone for 2 weeks. You know, it's not like you fly out to see you in the West Coast for 2-3 nights and you come home. 2 weeks is a long time. And travel was tough then.
How long was it supposed to take for the Titanic just to get there?
Well, they were going to try to break a record. I think usually it would take days, 5, 6, 7 days, weather dependent, and they were going to get there in like 5 days. They were going to leave it on the 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th.
That's not a bad cruise at that point.
No, 16th, 17th,
Okay.
like a week-ish,
So
depending on the
they're
weather.
cruising.
They're cruising, and it was one of the fastest ships out there. This was a big deal. But right out of the chute, he was surprised on who wasn't on the ship. And John Jay wasn't there yet. His best friend. He's like, "Oh, where's my buddy?" And the captain said, "One, your spot isn't quite ready yet. Just pull aside and we'll chat here a little. John Jay and some of your buddies aren't here yet, and you just watch what's going on." So imagine him. He's standing up on the rail, kind of sad that his wife and kids couldn't be with him on this event. Seeing some of his friends, I'm sure he was hollering to people as they were coming up, but also
It's a ruckus. 100,000 people or so.
100,000 people, and it was mixed emotion. I think you were very excited to go, but a little hesitant because there's always things to do. He was always behind in work to be done.
He's one of those guys.
He was one of those guys, but he always had a lot of projects on. It's like you or I, people don't get us that we have 10 projects going and they go, "Oh, you got to get those 10 projects done today." It's like, no, if I get 4 of them done, I'll be extremely happy.
I mean, if I'm on the Titanic, I know how to chill out a little bit, though. I'm not really that guy. I'm not the guy who's like just spinning his thumbs on board of the Titanic going, "But I got to get to that thing." Yeah. I'm not that guy.
Okay. Well, lo and behold, so he had mixed emotions. So he gets on board. I think he's on, walked around right off the bat, and he's in C87. He had a suite. He had a suite on the starboard side. As even walking around the first day, he's commenting, "There's not enough lifeboats on here." He literally didn't think there was enough lifeboats out of the chute. But he had well-traveled, and he knew what was going on. And interestingly, he had written a boat earlier called "A Mail Steamer Hits an Iceberg in the Atlantic and Sinks." So he had already kind of gotten credit for, could this happen? This was not outside the realm of possibility.
Because he'd already written a book that he died on a boat.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
Just full stop outright. When you're sitting on that Titanic and you've already rose to fame through a book that you already died on.
Whether he died, I can't recall. I need to do.
But so he wrote a book that a big ship sinks.
Yep, big ship sinks,
Okay.
and it hits an iceberg in the northern Atlantic. So it had to be on its mind. And he's walking around, and the big thing on that book, there wasn't enough boats.
Right.
But so he's walking around with Ishmael, the designer, and what's the guy? Andrew, the management guy. Can't think of that name, and I apologize. We'll dub this in. And then Captain Smith. And they're going, "We're going to be fine. We're going to be fine. There'll be plenty of boats here, and not to worry. You know, it's the safest ship ever." And that is the start of hubris, man's hubris, thinking you're unsinkable. That's the biggest challenge in life, when you think you're unsinkable. Wow. Mm-hmm. That's a take-home for business world. That's a take-home for family life. That's a take-home for personal life and your relationship with your Creator. You are sinkable. So he was off for that 6-hour cruise, walked around on deck, well-known. People saw him, and he was a superstar. He was somebody who'd come up and probably get an autograph, or as they walked by, there was kids up there, whatever, they'd go, there would be whispers, "That's WD, that's WD. You know, that's that great editor." or "That's WT."
Or F that guy.
Yeah, or they might haughtily go, they liked him or didn't like him. There's no in between on him. You loved him or you hated him. So he gets over to Charbord. John Jay was one of the first on board, his buddy. So John Jay comes on board, and John Jay had let him know that in Cherbourg, you couldn't come right up to the dock. You had to dock a little off, and they got brought up on these little
Cherbourg is what?
France. Cherbourg, France. They go from Southport, Southampton in England to Cherbourg, France.
I didn't realize I had multiple pickups.
Yeah.
It's new to me. There we go.
There you go. 6 hours it took to get across the English Channel. So there, he's thinking, one, John J. Astor is going to come on, which he did early, and John J. had said to him, now bring a binocular because we're going to be a little offshore and we're going to see who gets on. So sure shooting, he gets up there and he goes, you got your binoculars? Oh yeah. So now they stood to the side again, waiting to see who's going to be getting on board because a lot of people hadn't already gone on board. You know, where were the Vanderbilts? Where were the Morgans?
And this is last stop?
No, one more stop. This was going to be the stop if people were going to get on, because the next stop was going to be Queensborough, now Cobb, Ireland, and the wealth wasn't going to be probably coming on in Ireland. In fact, they thought they were going to be taking on workers because there had been a big coal strike, and they weren't able to get enough workers in those two other towns. England was going through a famine. England was having some economic distress. So I think they were going to be bringing on more workers there. They didn't know for sure. Knowledge was not as well known as it was today. You couldn't Google it. You couldn't Google to find out what's up. But they did know it was going to go Southampton, Cherbourg, Queenstown. So John Jay gets on. They had their little binoculars. And they're looking out like, I don't know how far it was, but close enough that you could see who was coming and going. Because certainly this is where the action was going to be. Now you got front row seats, like at the 16th hole, front row seat in the waste management tournament. Yeah. This is the spot to be. So they get the binoculars out, sure shooting. More cars were driving up here than people walking and horseback riding. So a lot of cars, a lot of wealth getting on there.
Right.
So what pulls up?
I mean, if it's a car, it might as well be a black Escalade at this point.
Yeah.
Like it's like just all the bougie shit.
Black Escalades wouldn't even count. I mean,
because the level of disparity
this is
that counts.
Duesenbergs, this is Mercedes-Benz, this is the posh of the posh of the posh.
Right.
This would be like Lamborghinis plus. Well, lo and behold, they're sitting there. And John J. Astor was a big car buff. He, richest man in the world, he had dozens and dozens of cars. And up drives this car that I describe in the book that has great big chrome fenders, suicide doors, unbelievable paint job. Out pops this little svelte gal in the back. Door opens. She starts to get out. Footmen come around and start to take her bags and to start to take it up to the ramp to get her up, the gangplank. Out comes great big handlebar mustache guy, portly, glasses, cane, J.P. Morgan. They knew exactly who it was. They could tell it with J.P. J.P. hasn't seen them, but they saw him. Because they're up like several decks and they can see him. He immediately gets he owns the White Star. We find out that the White Star line is owned by J.P. Morgan, and they knew it at the time. And he gets immediately a manila envelope. Somebody comes from around and gives him a manila envelope. He's like looking at it like, what's going on? Reads it, covers it, calls her back. They're seeing, W.T. Stead and John J. Astor are seeing this. Calls her back, gets her into the car, and as he's shutting the door, he looks up and they go eye to eye. He sees them, they see him, and they kind of have the look, and he drives away. John Jay and Stead look at each other and go, something's up. Why would the owner of the White Star Line not get on the ship?
Right. He owns the boat.
He owns the boat. He owns the White Star Line. He owns more than the boat. He owns the Olympic, the Britannica, the Olympic.
Yeah, he owns the whole fleet.
The whole thing.
Yeah.
Now, I think he owned it with a bunch of people, but he was one of the main owners. And even, let's say, And there was no fight at all either. Can you imagine?
It's like one of the owners of a team not going to the Super Bowl, though.
Yeah, last minute. I mean, the door is shutting. And not even only that, the girl didn't put up a fuss because you would have thought, if this girlfriend, we're not getting on the ship, let me go. So you think, give him a little credit. Maybe he had a big business deal. Maybe he had to sell another railroad, steel mill. Who knows what it was, what all JP did. Let me go. No fight. She gets in. They leave. John Jay instead say, something's up. Then at the meal that night, John Jay's there, Stead's there, Archibald Cox is there, Guggenheim's there, Strauss is there, kind of their best friends. There's 8 or 10 at the table. I got it all outlined in the book. Then they find out Vanderbilt didn't get on. And they didn't know that. They didn't witness that. But then the captain goes, there was some people that didn't make the cut, and the Vanderbilts canceled the last minute. So now John Jay and Stead are just thinking to themselves, that's odd. Why would J.P. Morgan decide at the last minute not to get on?
And those two were a little bit more in a clique than the other guys.
They were definitely in a clique, yep. In fact, when they were walking around the boat, now by day 2...
It's not just two random guys that don't happen to come on. It's like two best buddies that don't happen to come on.
And then already that day, Smith was kiddingly calling them the two. When you two are on deck and walking around, people are calling the two. They're the two. There's John Jay and Stead. So lo and behold, they get back there that night, and they find out Vanderbilt didn't get on. So now Vanderbilt's not on. J.P. Morgan's on, and now they're discussing, between Guggenheim, Strauss's, and now kind of, it's the stew. Who's here, who's not? And they kind of start talking about the other. And the other are the people, they're not there. So the confirmed Vanderbilts weren't there. Confirmed J.P. Morgan wasn't there. Confirmed, has anybody seen any Rothschilds or Rockefellers or Warburgs? Any of you guys seen any of those? Now that you mention it, no. And then they inquire with Smith, and now he's a little protective. He's a little protective that he couldn't really share with them who was on or not, because these guys were a little inquisitive. Because we're going to find out later in the show, or in the book, Smith knew what was going on. Smith was blackmailed to hit an iceberg. Smith was going to be hitting an iceberg, grazing an iceberg. The Carpathian, the California, were right there ready to have them hop on, and they were going to take the people back to Halifax, and something was up, but they didn't know what. Over the next couple days, then they stopped the next morning at Queensboro. None of the others got on. So now, as J.J., Astor, Guggenheim, Strauss, and Archibald Cox are walking around, they're known as the Five. And then the others are Warburgs, Rothschilds, Rockefellers, Vanderbilts. Where are they? And none of their kids are there. None of their families are there. That really is, they're starting to think about this. This is just odd. Why didn't they get on?
Because John J. Astor was also going to be meeting with a lot of those people over in the States.
Yep.
Right? So, like, in
all
any
of
of
them had
this.
business things. Yeah. All of them had deals going on. These were the powerhouse. This would be like Gates and
Bezos, Zuckerberg,
this
Elon, all of that.
They're the World Economic Forum. These are the guys that make it happen. So then they started independently thinking themselves, and I have that defined out each day as they're walking around. They thought something might be up. Like, instead goes, I think he first shared this with John Jay. Is there something up that they might want me dead? They might want me dead because I've made a lot of people's lives bad with the criminal law act being changed. And John Jay shares with Stead that, do you know, the Strausses and the Guggenheims and myself are not really in favor of this new thing called the Federal Reserve Bank that they're talking about? there's people in America that want to push that through, and we're not for that. Could that put us at risk? Then they got shared with them Archibald Butt, because now these guys at night try to go together. They kind of think, is somebody on deck that might throw us overboard? So now they kind of walk together at night. And then they go down, there's a swimming pool and a hot tub on this.
So they're
boat.
not thinking a monstrosity of an event.
No.
They're just thinking, I'm just
Individual.
going to get offed on this boat.
Yep, something, yes, yep. They weren't thinking big time yet. And then, but then it started to get, they thought all of them, something's up with all of them. And then Archibald Butt shared with them in the hot tub, the Turkish bath, that maybe somebody's out to get me because I have information from the Vatican that's basically dirt on Wilson, who's running for president. You know, could they want me off? So literally the group of 5 determined something's amiss. And how did we get this information off? Stead was sending the information off daily on the Marconi, and he was sending it off to our relatives in Kent. Like some would go, why didn't they send it to me? He didn't trust others. He trusted his cohort.
His crew was on the boat.
He had a lot of confidence on the boat, but you have close friends and very close friends.
Yeah.
And he didn't. He held his information close to the cuff. He shared information with our relative that he didn't share with other people.
And now I think it's pretty important to realize, like, so John J. Asser was up against the Federal Reserve at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And then WT was also going to the States to really push the line on transparency.
We found out he was going to name names, and somehow that must have slipped out, that he was going to name names. He never wrote it down that he thought on a paper. He never shared it with anybody, but he was intending to name names. We don't know if there's any correspondence that can collaborate that, but that was the inside scoop. He was going to come to America to name names.
And it was a Epstein level
Little black book.
breakthrough
Absolutely.
of what's happening within child sex trafficking.
Absolutely.
From the Vatican to the
Royals, yeah.
to all these other probably individuals in the U.S. or in Europe.
Definitely. This was going to be a ship show, big time.
Right.
So, and then, so they had it put together, and they didn't want to share the information with Smith because they thought the way he was acting was suspect. And then what do we start finding?
WT was acting suspect. No, Smith was acting.
Smith was acting
So, and
suspect.
Smith is the captain of the boat.
Yep, and he was the guy that was always on the head table and stuff like that. And because of the, 5 nights out, I think Stead and John Jay were there 3 nights on the head table. And then now moving forward, they really suspected something was up. That night, they had the last, the big meal of 10-course meal. Stead was at the table that night. I think the night wrapped up typically with the women going to the reading room and the guys going to the cigar room. And this little cadre often would meet on deck a little bit or go and discuss more of what's going on. And at the table all the time was, what's your thoughts, Captain, on are we going to beat the record to get there? We're going fast. It was no stars in the sky that night. Couldn't see very far, but it was crystal clear. It was weird. They said if there's more stars in the sky, you should have been able to see an iceberg coming up. And icebergs are huge, as you know. Huge. And then it did get out that there was a lot of new people on the ship. The new people going up in the crow's nest, they couldn't find their binoculars, and the word was out there that the guys were up in the crow nest with no binoculars. They couldn't see what was going on. And Smith had gone to bed early that night, which seemed a little odd. Things just weren't congruous. Things weren't inconsistent.
Mm-hmm.
Well, lo and behold, when they did hit the iceberg, it wasn't self-apparent. They didn't hit it head-on. If they would have hit it head-on, they could have probably survived. But they hit and breached a little part of it. And that's when Stead did start thinking, this is what's going on. Something is definitely awry, and those guys all knew that. And they even questioned, because then they started getting the orders, women and children first. They never said no men. They said women and children first, meaning if a boat is 40% or 40 men in it, or 40 women and children in it, it's got room for 20, put 20 more people in there.
Right.
So they started questioning that. But at the same time, they had sent up some flares to alert other people around them. And Stead noted, these are celebratory flares. These aren't the flares of we're in distress.
Really? It was like
Yeah.
fireworks?
It was thought to be a fireworks. It's like, so he was just really onto it. And then he was going down a guy, Peters, I think was JP. I didn't put this together because I always heard, I think it's JP. Jack Phillips. Whenever he'd write to your great-great-great-grandpa, he would talk about JP. And I never knew who JP was. Jack Phillips was the lead transcriber on the Marconi. So now think of all these people, like from day one, there's only 2 guys sending off on the Marconi day and night. There's a couple thousand people on board. Things are going to be nonstop. It'd be like having one phone and everybody trying to get on it. But Jack Phillips knew Stead was a big time editor and would be getting things off that were important. So there could be a line of 50 in front of them, little things to do. Jack would always move Stead's up because it was probably important. You know, I would probably write back, hey, LJ, I'm going to be down the dock in 3 days, and this is what we had for food tonight. Totally unimportant. Where he was writing down, we find out now, what was taking place on the actual device or ship. So the flares went up. He knew he was suspicious, and that was up. He thought boats in the distance, and they did, Carpathia and California. But something happened, they never came up. There are mysteries in the mysteries of the second book of, as information comes forward, why didn't they ever approach? Well, they were given a wrong signal. The signal was come quickly with the appropriate flares going up. Inappropriate flares went up. So once again, were they switched out? Did Smith have some other flares put in there? There's just a lot of questions you ask why.
Yeah.
And so it's just shrouded. It's an enigma wrapped in a mystery, wrapped in a riddle. But this starts to peel the onions off the Titanic mystery and takes the story much further down the line. Because I think in conclusion, with deep diving on historical significance and historical integrity, that we can now declare this historical friction. We're peeling the onion off of information that's never been revealed, and it's information a lot of people are not going to like.
Right, because it's not full clarity that this thing was for sure taken down maliciously.
Not full
However,
clarity.
when it comes to the possibility of something and the probability of something, it's more probable it got taken down maliciously
Yes.
than the probability that it just happened to go.
Yes.
There was too many factors of the people on board of why the people that were not on board would probably want this thing to at least be halted.
Yes.
Right? I think that's something that you've always taken into factor, where it's like these individuals maybe didn't even assume that the boat could get taken down.
It was unsinkable.
It's the Titanic.
No, it's unsinkable.
But they could slow it down.
Unintended consequences, have it bump an iceberg, have these ships then pre-assigned, taken to probably the closest to Halifax, and probably in Halifax there was going to be enough chaos, maybe then the guys would be thrown
Just pop
overboard.
them.
Something's going to happen. And why wouldn't they do it in London or New York? They
Too
were
much
busy.
press.
Too much
busy.
press, too much population.
It's in your
too many, whatever.
hometown.
Yeah, you do it in Halifax. I've been to Halifax. Halifax is still a sleepy town. So you could easily off somebody in Halifax. So I think the preponderance of evidence is such there's more to the story, and I hope that continues to peel the pieces off. I'm pretty confident that, all being said, I could be wrong, but you're going to have to approve it, because I'm really happy with and satisfied with information I've been given, because I go back to how would my relatives who live in Burr Oak, Iowa, have any information on the Titanic and WT? Zero.
Right.
Unless they corresponded, unless they met, unless they had a deep set passion and interest, which they did. Women's rights, helping minimize childhood sex trafficking, and living God's word here on earth. So at the start of this, I was really hesitant, thinking, this can't be true. When would they have ever met? They met twice. They met at the Chicago Stockyards. They met at Grinnell, Iowa, Grinnell College. They corresponded not only through Ed, but he ended up taking my grandpa Alva with him. So I have two levels of validation showing these are true.
Yeah.
These are true.
And it's not, that's the thing, it almost reminds me, it's like the first 9/11 event. Or at least it's the soonest or the earliest predated one that we know. Even though I think that malicious people have done malicious things way longer than we could even imagine. Mm-hmm. This was something that just continues to get glazed over when there maybe was more happening than you could ever imagine.
Absolutely. And I think there'll continue to be more layers of onion peeled away and slowly. But our passion of this whole thing is to keep Stead's name and mission alive, because he was a great man. He fought for women's rights. He fought for those who were being oppressed, like those in the childhood sex trafficking arena. And these are still things that are happening to this day.
Right.
So I feel very comfortable in moving the ball further down the field. And I think there is some risk with that. Who just paid off all the Jeff Epstein people to kind of be quiet? Of that whole thing, there's one person in jail. It's a woman. No men are in jail. What?
Right.
And then who paid that off? Don't believe me, Google it. J.P. Morgan Financing paid $280 million. What?
Right.
Why?
And everyone always gets into these a little conspiracy theories things, which I do fully understand. You can't conspiracy theory everything. But from the foundation of the Federal Reserve, it got weird. And you can't say like that's conspiracy theory. That's truth. It got weird.
It was formed by a bunch of families.
Since. And so to think that malicious, weird activity hadn't been started early and often to get to where they are today, which they're still doing weird, dicey shit. Come on.
Well, and who started it? It was the Rockefellers. It was the Vanderbilts. It was the Rothschilds. And there's still, if you dig deep to really who owns it, it's some directors and stuff. But the reality is it goes back to some very notable families still.
Right.
It's baffling. So it's a wonderful story. All being said, I could be wrong, but I'm sticking with it. This is true to my heart because I heard the stories a lifetime, collaborated it at many different levels with research, with family members in England, with other writers who have worked a lifetime on it. And that was probably the highlight of this whole thing. There was this woman that wrote a lot about WT and the Titanic called Grace Eckley. And I thought, golly, I got to meet this person. And I did some research through your help, and I found out she lived in Loveland, Colorado. Nothing on her. And then I'm going, golly, she's probably in her 90s. So not on Facebook, not on Instagram, not on LinkedIn, no big surprise. So then I said, okay, where did she write her books from? She was emeritus at Drake, Iowa. I go, okay, maybe there's any Eckleys down in Drake. So I did a little investigative reporting. I got to say, you and I, with my dad and your grandpa in radio, and now just all we like to do. This stuff's in our blood.
Right.
This stuff's in our blood.
Right.
Like someone go, would you choose to be a writer? Like, absolutely not. I'd rather be golfing and playing pickleball. I have to write. Like, you have to podcast. This is what we do. Well, lo and behold, I wrote down there to Iowa, and darn it, I found 2 lawyers, Eckley lawyers. And I contacted them. I go, hey, this Loring Stead, Rochester, Minnesota, kind of gave them the story. And they go, really? Grace Eckley's our mom. Whoa! Might I be able to meet Grace sometime? Probably not. She has dementia and is in an Alzheimer's clinic. Now, I did plates and screws and bones. I know all about that. I don't know the nuances of that. But they said she has some good days and bad days, but mostly bad days. It's probably not going to happen. That's fine, whatever. I said I read her books. They, over the next couple months, introduced my information to her, and they said she really loved this. She loves what you're doing because nobody's really picked it up. She said, you're kind of my legacy of picking things up. So lo and behold, I get a call, I don't know, 5 o'clock one Sunday, I think. Dr. Stead, our mom's having a great week or day. Do you want to come down? Hell yes, I'll be down. 4 hours later, I pull into this center down in Des Moines, Iowa. Grace Eckley and her son, one of her lawyer sons there, had the most wonderful time ever. We're hugging, we're kissing. She dedicated a book to me. She dedicated the ability to say some things that James Joyce had sent to her. She basically christened me as the next step. I have it on video. That was heartfelt because I really think I'm taking that mantle now. Now it's my turn. Just like WT went down in a boat, he knew it wasn't over. He was seen on the deck. He had just requested near thy God to me, and he's reading the Bible. He was comfortable in his skin.
Yeah, I think that's a touching story because it's impactful of where you're bridging it forward. And I think an important element of WT going down is the time that people encounter him most on the Titanic is being in the smoker's cabin at the end of the ship sinking.
Yeah.
And the jazz band's going. There's all these characters in the room who a lot of people had never known who these characters were. You've detailed very descriptively who these guys were.
Yeah. They feared
and they were
not.
It was a weird, joyous moment.
Yeah.
Not because they were excited to die, not because of all this, but they were like, we're pretty sure our mission is moving forward with or without us. We've done enough at this point.
And it'll be picked up. Once you're, like right now, if I pass away tonight, my great-great-grandkids will know me as that doctor put in some plates and screws and never got sued, which is an accomplishment. I'm happy with that.
Sure.
But this mission is far greater. I'm trying to push the ball down the field of not only W.T. Stead, but of the linkage to Ed Stead, to John, to Ed, to Elva, to Loring Sr., to myself, to you, to L, to Cece. I mean, the legacy is there. And we're going to pick the ball up and continue it. And that is lead by example, make it happen, service above self. And God's work on this earth is to our own hands. And the biggest thing, probably, fear not. No matter what's happening in the world, fear not. It's in God's plans. I literally believe that.
I love it. Well, God bless you all. This was Banter for the People. This is Dr. Stead, author, goofy doctor, all the things, but Titanic Truths is the next mission. We love it. God bless you all. Over and out.
And Grandpa of Cece.
And, well, GPO, Grand Potentate, is what you all really know him by.
Godspeed, Stead her out.